Okay, it looks like we have mostly everybody today. I want to say hello and welcome. My name is Lauren Van Dyke, and I'm a program assistant at the London Environmental Network. This evening, I'm excited to present to you with the Greener Homes London 5th webinar, focusing on what you can do during the colder months of the year to reduce your overall carbon emissions inside and outside of your home. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce to you Ilana Gustlits and Paul Gagliardi, two London locals who have been willing to join us today to share with you some tips and tricks on how to stay warm while cutting on energy consumption and still being able to take care of your garden during the winter months. Before I begin, I am a settler, and I want to begin by acknowledging the history and the traditional territory and honor the long-standing relationships of the 3 local First Nations of this land and place in southwestern Ontario. We at LEN honor the traditions and wealth of knowledge that the Dashkan Zibi, which are the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation hold and continue to pass down to future generations. Together, we can build stronger and more resilient communities that benefit and carry on the cultural traditions of the Indigenous people of this land. As I strive to respectfully acknowledge and weave this knowledge of these individuals into the work I do, I call you as listeners to not only revisit the 94 calls to action, but to find new ways to learn more about the rich history and thriving futures of these Indigenous peoples from your hometown. Together, by learning and working alongside Indigenous communities, we can make steps towards reconciliation as well as build climate resiliency. So linked in the chat here is just a few quick reads to help you get started. Now, moving on. So before we actually get into the webinar, a few housekeeping items. Please use the chat box during the Q&A session to pose any questions to our speakers, and also do it in a meaningful and safe manner, as we want to create a fun environment for all listeners to learn from. Lastly, when we look at this chart, you can see here personal vehicle use and housing are the largest categories of emissions in London. And in the winter, you can only imagine how these numbers will increase as our gardens get covered up in snow and we turn up the heat in our homes to stay warm. Here's an example of carbon emissions in the Northern Hemisphere and how they increase from July all the way to December. This is a direct result of individuals changing their habits and plants being covered up by snow and not being able to photosynthesize and collect all that extra carbon in the atmosphere anymore. So again, I want to thank you for showing interest in doing your part to lower these numbers. Now, while keeping this in mind, I want to give you a sneak peek on a special offer through the Greener Homes London program that will give homeowners the opportunity to reduce these numbers through their own household emissions. This opportunity includes a free one-on-one coaching session from a London Environmental Network staff member to help Londoners green their homes. If you want to stay updated on this program or want to participate, be sure to sign up for the Greener Homes London mailing list or visit our website linked in the chat. You can also simply scan the QR code on the screen and use the promo code free checkup so you guys can register and have this one-on-one coaching session. Now to introduce to you our first speaker. Ilana has been with Growing Chefs Ontario since 2019. She attended Dalhousie University for international development and worked in restaurants throughout her studies. Interested in connecting to how we grow our food, she worked for Slow Foods in Barbados, Dominica, and Jamaica throughout the winter months while working on farms in Canada during the growing seasons. First apprenticing at Foxglove Farms under Michael Albin on Salt Spring Island, BC, and then working at Soul Food Street Farms in Vancouver. Wanting to focus on education and food, she then worked at the youth education coordinator at Green Thumbs Growing Kids Toronto, a nonprofit teaching garden and food education non-for-profit. Now working for Growing Chefs and raising her 2-year-old, Ilana is most excited when sharing her passion for gardening and the community. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Ilana, it's up to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm really excited to talk about the winter garden. It feels very appropriate now that we've got all this snow on the ground. So some of the information that I'll cover in this, we might be a little beyond the point that you can do some of the outdoor components, but it's something awesome to keep in mind for next year. So a little bit about Growing Chefs for those of you who aren't familiar. Growing Chefs is a local not-for-profit. Our mission is to change the way we help children, youth, families, and the greater community learn about and develop healthy relationships with food. We do that through children, youth, adult and community education all around food, both growing food and cooking food. We now have 2 locations. One is downtown and one is at the Grove at Western Fair District, our new teaching kitchen facility. And we have lots of garden space there as well as an exciting new greenhouse project. So you can check out our website for lots of more details and recipes and all of our programs if you ever want to get involved. So Lauren already introduced all this info, so just a little bit of background about why I know about growing food all year round. I've worked in farms in Canada and farms in the Caribbean all year round, growing indoors and outdoors. So my area of expertise is in edible landscaping and edible farming. I don't have a ton of knowledge about ornamentals, but I do have a little bit because I also personally love flowers myself. So I'm going to talk today about winterizing your garden. So some of you may have garden space outdoors. Some of you may have community garden space. Maybe you have a balcony garden. Maybe you have some plants indoors. All of these things can kind of be applied to all those different settings. And, you know, your garden might be in raised beds or in ground. No matter what, even in a pot in your windowsill, soil health is important. And there's some information in this presentation for all of those different kinds of gardens. So your garden is a really great place to make an impact on, you know, an intentional lifestyle that is seeking to reduce emissions. The main way in the winter that you can be reducing your emissions with winter gardening is by reducing your food miles. So transportation of your food obviously creates lots of emissions, and both by reducing your food miles and increasing your access to fresh produce, you can definitely help with reducing your emissions. It also will reduce your costs, often over time, because to start a garden, you need to spend a little bit. It will create a healthy habitat for animals and insects. Again, if you have an outdoor garden, even a balcony, you'll see over time, you'll have more visitors, different animals, and beneficial insects coming into your space. You'll improve the soil health in your neighborhood. And it's a really great, fun hobby. It's a great way to stay connected with our role in food systems, especially learning how to value produce. We often don't see the value in produce, but when you grow it yourself, you see how much work goes into it, and it really adds a value to that. And yeah, it's a great way to stay active and outside all year round. So putting your garden to bed, we often say putting a garden to bed. Basically, that's just putting it down for the winter. So again, we've already got snow outside. It's not going to stay here forever. There's still time to get some work done in your gardens. And it's a great way to set yourself up for success in the spring is to start with a good winterized garden. So you're going to improve your soil health and make a welcoming habitat for different animals that seek refuge in our garden spaces. So some different things that you can do to put your garden to bed for the winter are to pot up plants to move indoors. In this picture, you can see these are actually avocado plants that we keep outside at our office. We started them from pits with our summer camp at Growing Chefs, and we bring them inside in the winter and they grow. That's an older picture. Those 4 plants are about 3 or 4 feet tall now. So potting up your plants, moving them indoors is a great way to continue growing all season. as well, you're going to want to remove any weeds that have gone to seed in your garden that you don't want in there. That said, you're going to want to leave some things. So leave some leaves. If you haven't heard that before, leaves create a really great habitat for different animals, beneficial insects like bees, and different little critters that make their nests in the leaves. Lots of folks are concerned about lawn care. And a very small layer of leaves isn't going to affect your lawn. It's actually going to help it by mulching it, and those leaves will break down over the winter. If you have a really thick layer of leaves and you're worried about your grass lawn, leave some areas of your garden with leaves, like your garden beds and paths that can have a leaf layer that won't affect your lawn. And that'll provide a great habitat for different animals. Mulching is a really great way to put your garden to bed. Try to skip the dyed wood chips. Lots of people think they look nice, but that dye is going to slowly leach out into our water systems, which is not as aesthetically pleasing. Save some flowering heads. Those as well, the flower heads and the stalks and stems are great habitats for different beneficial insects like mason bees, as well as logs and brush piles. Again, you don't need to let your whole lawn go wild. You might get some complaints from neighbors, but leaving little areas naturalized is a great way to ensure that you've got a great habitat for beneficial insects and critters that will help you with your garden once spring comes along. So some things that you can overwinter, again, the goal being reducing your food miles by producing your own food, increasing your access to fresh, healthy food, and connecting yourself to our greater food system. The easiest thing you can do is leaving plants in the ground. So there are some plants that are more cold hardy. They can handle a little bit of frost. We're zone 5B in this part of London, and we can still have lots of things growing all over the winter. They may die back a little bit, but they'll come back in the spring. Examples of those kinds of plants, lots of brassicas. So that's your kale, your collards, your broccoli, your cabbage. Those can all withstand a good amount of cold. And as you can see in this picture, this kale grew all winter long, covered in snow, and we could still be harvesting off of it. This is from our headquarters garden at Growing Chefs. So you can leave those plants out in your garden and harvest from them all winter, and they'll also start growing back really beautiful in the spring before any other things grow. So you get a little head start. As well, things like carrots and beets, they actually enjoy a little bit of frost. The frost encourages them to release this natural antifreeze that converts the starches into sugars, and it actually sweetens them. So lots of farmers will leave carrots in the ground until they get frosted and dig them up, and those are like a specialty, very sweet carrot, and the same goes for beets. And then as well, spinach. Spinach is a great crop to grow over winter, and you can harvest from it for almost every month of the year. And then you can do some fall planting. Again, the goal of this being to grow crops that need that kind of cold snap like garlic, as well as extending your growing season by making sure you get a really early spring crop. So the examples of things that would be great for fall planting are onions, garlic, broad beans, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. The broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, you'd have to start seedlings a few months ago, but you could also buy seedlings at a garden center and plant those as mature plants. It's a bit late for most of these things, but once the snow melts, if you haven't done it yet, you can still get your garlic in the ground. It'll be fine. As long as you get in the ground before the soil freezes, you will be able to get your garlic in the ground and you'll have a summer harvest of garlic. So there's some other things you can do to extend your growing season, and we call those season extension tools. Some of them are more expensive. Obviously, things like a greenhouse, a hoop house, that's a good cost. You can buy hobby versions of those for your backyard. But some more affordable things you can do is use some row cover. So that could either be fabric row cover called Remay, or you could use plastic row cover to create basically a mini greenhouse. You can also use a cold frame, which you can see in this picture here. We've just built like a wooden box with corrugated plastic on top, and that allows us to grow herbs and flowers and greens at our Growing Chef's headquarters all winter long. This is a picture with, as you can tell by the snow, taken in the winter time. And yeah, the more expensive things are things like low tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. Again, you can get small hobby versions for a backyard. And you can also do easy things like digging up your plants and bringing them indoors to overwinter. Like a mature pepper plant or a hot pepper plant is something that's really fun to dig up and bring inside and harvest hot peppers from all winter. And as well, you can set up grow lights. You can also grow lots of things in a windowsill if you don't invest in those grow lights, but you can also set up grow lights. You can use them to start your seedlings indoors, to grow microgreens, and to grow more mature plants. So to growing indoors, again, there's some really easy things you can do just with a windowsill and some seeds. And then if you want to get a bit more of a professional looking setup, you can get some grow lights and trays and dome lids and things like that. But as you can see here, this is just a little paper cup that had some pea seeds in it to grow pea shoots, and that's probably 2 weeks in a windowsill, and we got beautiful pea shoots to add to a salad or a sandwich. Again, you're avoiding buying that fresh produce at a grocery store where those things are in a package, have been shipped in and traveled a long distance, and you're really connecting yourself to how things are grown. It's a great activity to do with kids. So really easy things that you can grow just in a windowsill if you don't want to buy grow lights is pea shoots, sunflower shoots, all sorts of kinds of microgreens. I really like radish microgreens. They're very spicy, but turnips, mustard greens, those all make great microgreens. You can also put potted herbs in your windowsill, and that way you're not buying those plastic little packs of herbs that you end up using one little sprig of and the rest goes to waste. Things like parsley and rosemary, you can grow right on your windowsill all winter long. And again, you can bring in those potted up mature plants from your garden to harvest from. Even things like your herbs and your kale, you could bring indoors and harvest from all winter long. So this is our Growing Chef's website again, our social media. Please give us a follow. We've always got lots of great recipes and programming. We've brought back our in-person programming at reduced capacity, but at our new facility at the Western Fair. So check it out and get involved, and we'll soon be taking volunteers again. So thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing the questions you may have.
Alrighty, thank you, Ilana. Yeah, just another reminder for anyone who wants to ask any questions, please post them in the chat box. So here we go. We can start with this Q&A session. Ilana, if you don't mind, just stop sharing your screen. Perfect. Awesome. So I guess our first question we have is, you kind of mentioned about greenhouses. So what exactly is the feasibility if you wanted to operate a smaller scale greenhouse, and what kind of produce could you grow in it?
So if you wanted to have a greenhouse for your own personal yard, you'd want to double check the bylaw restrictions, but I believe anything under 100 square feet, you can build without any consultation with the city. Double check the square footage, I might be incorrect. But you can have a hobby greenhouse in your backyard. I have a small little one in my yard as well. If it's unheated, you could still be growing things like that are more cold hardy, like kale and different herbs and lettuce and spinach for a really long portion of the year. As well, it makes a great place to grow your seedlings if you want to keep those out of your house and not buy any grow lights. So it'll still get cold in a greenhouse in the evening, but it'll stay above freezing for most of the year. So they're a great little investment. They're very fun to spend time in, and you can definitely extend your growing season a lot, and you can buy them at a relatively affordable cost from most local garden centers. I think I got mine from Rona.
Awesome, thank you. Another quick question we have is, what about composting? What would you recommend for composting in the winter and preventing it from freezing?
Yeah, so that's tough. If you don't have a very large compost pile, it's not going to generate enough heat because compost does generate its own heat. Fun fact that I like to tell the kids who come through our programs, a compost pile can get hot enough to cook a turkey. It takes like a full day, but you can wrap it up and stick it in a compost pile. But that's a very large heap style compost pile usually. If you have a small compost bin, maybe one of those rolling ones in your backyard, they do freeze, and your compost will just basically freeze its degrading process over the winter. That said, if you're having trouble accessing your compost because it's frozen shut, because you're not going to get the scent and the pests that you would as much in the summer, you can always put it in a bucket, and once things start to thaw, you can add that bucket from outdoors into your compost. But yeah, unless you have a very large compost pile, it's pretty hard to keep it from freezing.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps it for Q&A session. Again, if anybody has any questions for Ilana, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we can collect them later and she can answer them at a later time. Once again, thank you, Ilana. And it was really nice hearing all the wonderful things you had to share with us.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
No worries. Thank you. Awesome. So now we are going to be moving on to our next speaker. So here we have Paul. Oh, 1 second. I have some technical difficulties here. Perfect. Okay. So Paul's vision has positioned NRGwise to grow into one of the leading consulting firms that assist homeowners to take advantage of incentive programs to increase their energy efficiency of their homes. The entrepreneurial bug struck Paul early when he was just 16, as he started an in-ground sprinkler company. He ran the company while he attended high school and throughout university at the University of Western Ontario, studying a BA in economics, and the University of Windsor, studying an honors BA in commerce. Paul started Wise Inspections in 2000 as a high-quality home inspection company serving the London area. In 2007, he shifted its business almost entirely to government and utility-backed energy savings incentive programs and rebranded his company to what's now called NRGwise Consulting. So without further ado, here's our next speaker, Paul.
Good evening, everyone. And here comes the picture. Okay, and I'll share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Try that again.
There we go.
Okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's not quite in presenting mode yet, but we can see it.
Oh, yep, I can get that. And yes.
There we go.
I think we're good.
Thank you, Paul. We are.
Okay, I'm working with two screens. So if you see me looking up, I'm looking at the secondary screen. Let's talk about the house, your home, and winterizing your home. Water, uncontrolled water is definitely the enemy of your home. So let's start with the roof. Before the snow falls, or in this case, it's here, you may want to wait a couple of days till it melts. Do check your shingles or whatever roofing material you have. Very important to make sure that water does not get in through the roof. It will do a lot of damage throughout your house. It'll ruin insulation and could lead to health issues because of molds and mildews throughout the house. So I definitely recommend you start with your shingles. Following that, you want to make sure that your gutters and your downspouts are clear. As a home inspector, I've seen all kinds of things up there. I've seen tennis balls, they go right to the downspout, they plug your downspout, you can have water backing up. And once it freezes, that water can freeze up and back up onto your shingles. Once you have an ice dam on your shingles, any snow melt above it can actually get stopped by the ice dam and back up onto your shingles and cause a lot of damage. So I definitely recommend looking after this in the spring, and then again in the summer, in the fall as well. With regards to your downspouts, those two, you want to see if you can extend those at least 4 feet from your foundation. You don't want to give water any excuse to back up against your foundation and find cracks and leak into your basements. With regards to your attic, if you do have ice buildup, it could be a result of a couple of things. Number one, you may not have enough insulation inside of your attic. And number two, you may not have enough ventilation inside of your attic. Doesn't matter how much insulation you have up there, heat will always find its way through. And that's why you should have adequate ventilation around your eaves to remove any remaining heat that comes through the shingles. Any of that heat will also enhance the ice damming on top of your shingles. Now, this is a temporary solution, definitely not an energy efficient solution, but while you're contacting a contractor to have a look at your attic for any ice damming issues, you could install electric heating elements as well, but I would only treat that as a temporary measure. As for your faucets, whether they're in your garage or in the back of your house, do make sure that you find the shutoffs in your basement. You want to turn those off so that the water at the valves outside don't freeze and burst. Again, uncontrolled water is your enemy. And once you do shut the valve off in the basement, on that valve, there should be a little smaller valve that you could open up to drain the water that is in your pipes. So the water between the inside shutoff valve and the outside shutoff valve. Definitely make sure you drain that as well. And when you do that, make sure you have a bucket so you're not dropping water on your floor in your basement, especially if it's finished. The next thing you want to do is you want to look through your house for different areas of cracks or holes. So windows is one area, but in your basement, if you look at the top of the cement wall where the floor is for your floor above, anywhere where there's a penetration, whether it's the water line going to the outside, possibly the air conditioning lines, electrical conduits, you want to make sure that around all of those, you have a good seal. You don't want to allow cold air to be drawn into your house because that air has to be heated. And the more air that moves into your house, the more you have to heat and you'll be running up your energy costs. So typically the air will come into your house through cracks on the windward side of your house. So the side of your house, the wind is blowing against, and it will leave your house on the leeward side, so the opposite side of the house. When the air comes in from outside, it usually comes in as dry air in the wintertime, and the air leaving your house leaves as humid air. So if you have cracks in your walls, for instance, you're going to have that warm, humid air traveling outside your house, but condensing inside your wall cavities. So you do want to make sure you can seal up as many cracks as possible so that you don't have any unanticipated mold or mildew buildups inside your house. And things you can do as well is with regards to your outlets in your house, so switches or receptacles on all exterior walls and all walls on your upper floors, you can buy those gaskets you can install beneath the actual cover plate. They help as well. And I did say all walls on your upper floor because when they wire a house, a lot of the wiring goes straight up the wall into your attic. And unless you have a newly built house, built to code and properly sealed, you have a 1-inch hole and a small wire going through it. And that's just an area where lots of air does leak out of your house. If you're considering window or door replacements, you may want to take advantage of the 2 energy programs out right now, the Greener Homes Grant Program or the Enbridge rebate program. And both of those require that you have an energy assessment before you start any of the work in your house. And we can help you with that if you like. Our website's up there. What would happen then next is you would have the work completed in your house. And once the work is done, you would have a follow-up energy assessment, and your energy advisor would then file all the reports with the government or the utility so that you can claim any rebates or grants associated with the upgrades. Your heating system. So if you have a furnace downstairs, you definitely want to have that serviced in the fall. They will look at a number of things. They will look at your fan, make sure it's clean. They will look at the filter. We'll talk about that in the next slide again. You want to make sure that your furnace is running clean and efficiently to extend its life and to reduce your energy usage. And we'll talk about the filters next. If you don't change your filters on a regular basis, it does impede upon the airflow through your furnace. Most new furnaces have variable speed motors and they detect the airflow. So if you have a clogged filter, that air will not flow through as freely. Your furnace will sense that, and it will increase the fan speed to draw more air through. You're increasing your fan speed, you're now decreasing the efficiency of your furnace. So it's very important to make sure those are changed on a regular basis. Most people don't know this, but the filter in the furnace is really there to protect the furnace itself. You can, however, buy better filters to also clean the air. When you buy those better filters, though, those filters will clog up faster because they are capturing a lot more particles, and you'll want to make sure that you change those filters a lot more frequently. Otherwise, again, your furnace can starve for air. Another thing you can do as well is install one of the new smart thermostats. I have both of those. I have one of those at our office and one of those at my house, and they're fantastic. They learn your patterns. You can still program them as well. What they do is they sense when you're around, and they'll bring the temperatures back to the levels that you prefer them to be at. But when you're not in the area or you're not in the house, they will reduce those temperatures to save energy, and they will actually sense when you come back into the house. The one on the left up there, you can see it has a small white sensor. So in my house, I have 4 sensors in various different rooms and floors of the house, and it monitors all of them. So it'll monitor where we are actually in the house, and it'll work to keep those areas warmer and not concentrate on the rest. Again, saving energy. This is something I would recommend. And as for your hot water tank, if you do have an electric hot water tank, you may want to consider purchasing an insulating blanket. It's a safety issue to put those on gas hot water tanks, so don't. But if it's an electrical one, I do recommend it. If you have a gas hot water heater, you may want to upgrade to the more efficient condensing the wall hung heaters. They're instantaneous. They're fantastic. I've had them in my last 2 houses. I really love them. They never run out of hot water, but when you're not using it, they're not running. Again, you can take advantage of the NRGwise rebate program if you do want to install one of those. And again, get your energy assessment before and then after the work is completed. Insulation, we talked about the attic a little bit, but within the walls of your house, if you have an unfinished basement, this may be an easier project to tackle. You lose actually a lot more energy through your walls than you do through your ceiling. So if you think about a house, a typical house, for the amount of square footage you have on ceiling area, you have 2 or 3 times more surface area on your walls. So you would lose a lot more energy through your walls. If you can insulate your basement, I definitely recommend it. Again, there's incentives for that. And if you have an older house, 1965 or older, there may be limited or no insulation in your main floor walls as well. And there's an opportunity there as well to get an insulation company in there to give you a quotation to inject the insulation. So this is another area that could really improve the comfort of your house and the energy efficiency of your house. I have to finish this up by talking a bit about safety. Your dryer vents should be cleaned twice a year. These will get lint buildup in them, and if they're not maintained, that lint can overheat and lead to fires. So definitely pay attention to your dryer vents. If it's blocked as well, it'll make your dryer work harder. So if you are noticing that you're trying to dry clothes and it's taking 2 or 3 cycles now to dry your clothes, it might be that vent might be plugged. So you may want to have a look at that as well. And finally, with regards to safety, you definitely want to make sure your batteries are changed on your carbon monoxide and your carbon dioxide detectors, your smoke detectors. Another thing that many people don't know is that both of those devices have a limited lifespan. So when you're taking that down to have a look at the battery, look at the expiry date as well. All sensors degrade. You want to make sure you have that looked after for your own family safety. And that's all I have. So if you have any questions, please ask away.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. So when you got the chance, you can stop sharing your screen
Okay.
and I can dive in with a first question here. So are metal roofs more efficient than the shingle roofs, and would they fare better in the winter time, would you say?
The roofing type, I wouldn't say one is more efficient than the other, unless you have a shiny roof. Of course, if you have a shiny roof and you don't have heat build up like you do with shingles, more of a summertime issue than winter. You can get shingles that last 50 years now, and you can get a steel roof or a metal roof, aluminum, that also lasts up to 50 years. Uh, I don't know. You may want to talk to a roofing company about that one.
Hmm. And then just briefly, this question is just telling where you can see if there's any leaks in around your windows or doors or exterior walls. How do you know if there's a big draft other than just, feeling that wind coming through?
Unless you have a really windy day, a blower door test is fantastic. If you have an energy advisor out to your house, he'll create an artificial wind, and you'll be able to actually walk around your house and with your energy advisor, and you'll be able to feel all the areas where there's air leakage. Some people use a little piece of toilet paper, and that will actually just flutter in the wind. If you're in your basement and you're looking up towards the top of the ceiling and you look around the perimeter, look for those cobwebs. I'm not saying that everyone has a dirty basement, but look for those cobwebs moving in the wind. Another thing that you can do as well is with your home inspector or energy advisor, they have typically infrared cameras, and the infrared cameras work great for finding areas of air leakage when there is a temperature differential between the inside and the outside. So in spring and fall, when the temperatures are the same, not so effective, but at this time of year, through the winter and through the middle of summer, it'll outline a lot of areas of air leakage for certain.
Awesome. Thank you. One final question here. So, when you are looking into doing home retrofits, where do you always recommend homeowners to start other than just an Guide home energy audit? Is there a specific retrofit that you recommend homeowners do first?
Always insulation. You want to first insulate your house because once the house is insulated, it will then need less energy. And if it needs less energy when you're speccing out heating equipment, you probably won't need as large of a heating appliance as you have now. So always start with insulation and air sealing. You go hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. That wraps up the Q&A session. Again, a reminder, if anybody has any last minute questions, throw them in the chat box and we'll answer them later. Cool. Thank you, Paul. Alrighty, so let's carry on with our presentation. So now, let me just get everything. So now, thank you. And again, for Paul and Ilana for sharing your insights on what best practices can be done in the next few months, or even to prep for next winter as we already have snow on the ground. Before we wrap things up, I want to remind you all of the little things we can do over the next few months to ensure the holiday season is well spent, but with as little emissions as possible. So I call you all to action and to consider these next few sustainable tips. So, support low waste. Every year, Canadians have the tendency to increase their consumption over the holiday season, and the majority of this comes from wrapping paper waste. In fact, you can fill the CN Tower 4.5 times with the amount of wrapping paper that is used. So with this in mind, find new ways to wrap your gifts with either reusable holiday boxes or old newspaper, or better yet, refrain from wrapping gifts at all. Secondly, why not normalize regifting and consignment gifts? It is all right to return a gift if you feel you have no need for it, or you can simply donate it. Regifting is to someone who will actually need the gift, will ultimately reduce the amount of things that will get bought and not used, and potentially even thrown away in the trash before their life cycle is up. So shared with you in the chat is going to be a link to David Suzuki's foundation, in which shares tips on regifting and the idea of presence instead of presents. By slowing down and acknowledging the things that truly matter over the holiday season, such as time spent with loved ones, we can hopefully minimize our carbon footprint together and make it a sustainable holiday season. So second call to action, support local. This is always reiterated. With that being said, I challenge you to do all your holiday shopping within the city boundaries of London and ultimately reduce the amount of GHG emissions used through traveling and shipping of online packages. Recent reports have noted that distribution companies emit over 51 million metric tons of GHG emissions in the span of a single year. So in order to lower these numbers, just shop within the city here and avoid fast fashion and online shopping by supporting local businesses here in London. So better yet, promote or shop at these stores that promote slow fashion and the recycling of their products. So some examples are Filthy Rabina Vintage, Goodwill, and Boutique Topaz in the Kids Consignment Center. So those links will be provided for you in the chat. Secondly, all resale goods are good, but of course, we still want to promote local businesses that promote sustainability. Locally Made is a wonderful business, as same with Reimagine Co. So those websites will also be linked in the chat. And lastly, instead of giving gifts, why not give the gift of green instead by donating to some local environmental charities? Land Right Now is one of, for example, and they are offering donations, or they are accepting donations as well. And that link is provided in the chat as well. So lots of resources for us moving forward. Now, next to our last and final action, support Indigenous artists and business owners. This can include shopping through online marketplaces, stores, or buying directly in store. Here in London, there's a local business called Bear's Den, owned by Indigenous owners. And here you can buy and support these individuals throughout the holiday season. Or better yet, explore hashtags on Instagram and interact with the content to help build these businesses as well. Lastly, I strongly encourage you to not only support local Indigenous business owners, but to take the time in your down days over the holidays to read and share with family members books and stories written by Indigenous authors sharing their hardships endured. For this, I recommend the book Braiding Sweetgrass. And you can potentially gift them to family members who would take interest in learning about how to create a more sustainable world while integrating Indigenous perspectives into modern society. As the holiday season is meant to be spent with loved ones, it is also time to reflect on all the ways you can help support one another and build resiliency through reconciliation. Awesome. And that wraps up our gifts. So again, thank you everyone for attending. I hope you all learned something, and especially a big, huge thanks to our 2 speakers and volunteers to help organize this event. Lastly, again, one last reminder, if you have any other questions, throw them in the chat and we can answer them at a later time. And before leaving, we would appreciate to hear from you on ways we can improve our programming and future events. So please spare a few minutes to complete our feedback survey linked in the chat. And one last reminder too, here's the QR code again that you can scan to sign up for your free one-on-one home checkup using the code FREE CHECKUP. Again too, you can visit our website and sign up for any newsletters and keep up to date on events and previous webinars, all posted on the London Environmental Network's website. So one last huge thank you. And again, thanks to all of our sponsors. It was a great evening with you all, and enjoy the rest of your night. Bye, everyone.